There we go. All right. I believe we are recording. So yeah, let's give everyone another 30 seconds to about 30 seconds to a minute to join. Thank you to the few that are here already, and especially to you, Amahl, for giving up your time to have this chat today.
Pleasure.
You excited?
Oh yeah, very excited. We've been planning it for a bit, so nice that we can kind of bring it to life. Yeah,
we have, and I guess the exciting thing is that there's so many industries that we're quite agnostic, right? So today we'll be talking about recruitment, and hopefully I can get you and some other people involved moving forward, do more of these bit more obviously different industries. But I guess the more we talk about one industry, even if people from different industries are joining chats like these, the more we'll be able to help solve, I guess, similar problems that people are facing.
Unquestionably. I mean, at the end of the day, like what we do, as you said, is very industry agnostic. So even though we're discussing more recruitment use cases today, I still think that there are a lot of benefits to come out of, I could actually spin this a different way in my industry or in my business in the context of an automation or fostering new business or getting more out of existing customers. So I think certainly, as you said, hopefully we can do more chats around other industries moving forward, but good to delve into this one as a start.
Exactly. I'm going to share my screen now and we'll get going with the presentation. And I'll also turn my video off. There we go. All right. So today, we're here to talk about how customer experience automation meets and infuses with the recruitment industry. It's hosted by myself and Amahl, who is an onboarding specialist within ActiveCampaign. A few housekeeping rules for anyone. I think there's only a few people on the call, but if anyone else has joined recently, please just keep your cameras off, keep your microphone on mute. Please don't invite anyone to the call. And if you have any questions, just chuck them in the chat bar and we'll either answer them at the end of the call or do the best to answer them. If not at the end of the call, then eventually for you. We've got a bit of an agenda today. Today we'll talk about how we can help ensure recruiters get the most value out of their clients, how we can help optimize the overall candidate experience and process, and how ActiveCampaign can help overcome general challenges that recruiters might be facing as well. We'll also dive into your role, Amahl, as an onboarding specialist, do some Q&A, and then we'll wrap it up at the end. So let's dive straight into topic number one and talking about how we can help ensure recruiters get the most value out of their clients by talking about, I guess, the first topic, or the first subtopic, which is how do we stay front of mind? How do we keep in touch with clients to be front of mind? Do you want to maybe dive into that, Amahl?
Yeah, sure. I think ultimately that's a really important thing. We know that recruitment's a pretty competitive game. So one of the things that is really imperative is to keep those regular touch points with your existing clientele so that, when they're of course ready, they think of you first. And there's a whole host of kind of different ways and strategies you can deploy in order to do that. So starting firstly with the types of things that you can send them. Of course, you can always send them an email that says, hey, how are you going? And just check in. But of course, that gets a bit old, that gets a bit stale, and might give clients kind of the wrong idea as well, that you're not giving them value. So it's really important in your communications that you look at giving value. So things like, when it comes to types of content, market reports, things like testimonials, talking about placements and case studies. Of course, newsletters are a very typical avenue in email marketing. Sharing profiles of candidates, of course, that's naturally very, very important. That's what most clients want to hear from you from. And just sort of stuff like that, even stuff like seasonal content as well for certain seasonal employers potentially. So there's a few different sort of variants of content that you can consider, but I think the overall idea is you've got to look at adding value to that client with whatever you're sending them. So a simple check-in can get, of course, a bit stale. You're not really looking at adding value, but rather you're looking at taking value. So I think it's really important to do that.
Well, what about the frequency of content? Because I know that, when you say frequency, I think I was talking to a client of mine in that space, and she said that recruiters, most of them are of the mindset of just sending out as much communication as they can, rather than being a little bit more personalized, a little bit more timely in their approach. So do you want to touch a little bit on that as well?
Absolutely. I think that's that of course is the holy grail of email marketing as well. How often do I actually send my communication? And what I would say to that is depends kind of on two factors. And number one is what type of communication are you sending? So if it's a market report, as an example, you might set the expectation with your clients that you're going to send them a quarterly market report as a start. So of course that gives them the indication that they can expect to hear from you every 3 months. I had a client who sent what they called a recruitment client specifically, who sent what they called a weekly wrap and a monthly wrap. So these were kind of, I think, newsletters. And again, they combined kind of a range of bits and pieces, tips, placements, case studies, news from their end as well, a bit of social content. But I think the idea behind this, I think number one, of course, is setting the expectation and looking at what the content really, what the frequency that the content sort of entails, but also what do your clients want? I think this is a really great thing with ActiveCampaign in that you can have, for example, a quarterly business report that you send out, or market report, testimonials, candidate profiles, and you can actually ask your clients, what do you want from us? So do you want our weekly newsletter? Do you want our monthly newsletter? Do you want our quarterly market report? And ask the client to actually tell you what they want. And as such, that obviously then dictates how often you send certain types of communication. And it means because they've genuinely opted into something and they seem to be interested in something, they're more likely to actually take some action off the back of it.
Yeah, and just quickly, our segment builder, do you want to talk about how that can help, how that really does help determine the cadences that people go down, therefore resulting in much more timely content, emails, communication?
Absolutely. So as a start, as I said, dividing people up into different groups around what content they're interested in. So if I'm interested in receiving your monthly newsletter and your quarterly market report, and you're interested in receiving a testimonials and a quarterly market report as an example, using kind of our segment builder obviously allows you to really robustly do that in a way that, well, we can of course segregate them out, make it clear and easy so that at the click of a button, it's really simple for you to send a piece of communication specifically to the group that wants to receive that communication. Yeah. So I think the important thing is we really make it incredibly efficient and simple for you to do that.
Okay. And just jumping over to qualifying clients based on engagement, which is obviously the nuts and bolts of figuring out how and when and who to target at what time. So do you want to talk about those 3 points that we've listed there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's certain ways that you can qualify clients off the back of the types of content that we talked about. So we've of course got things like one-off emails naturally, series of emails after downloading a lead magnet. So that's one important sort of facet of ActiveCampaign, is that we preach automation sequences as a big part of what we do. So series off the back of downloading a lead magnet, or off the back of visiting a page on the site, or even just a welcome series off the back of say just signing up on a website or even off a social profile. Yeah. So I think there's a few different ways that you can deliver it that may not necessarily mean you send just one-off emails, but you can trigger it off the back of certain events happening and send them a series of emails to keep them engaged.
And in terms of qualification though, like in terms of, okay, we've got this client, obviously dependent where they are in the pipeline, but in order for us to really understand how qualified they are, that's where contact and lead scoring comes in handy, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think when it comes to that, for anyone who doesn't know about lead scoring, the idea behind that is we sort of gamify the entire engagement process, where we assign points to people based on the actions that they take. So for example, they open an email and get 1 point, and they click on an email and get 2 points. That's very much a big part of qualification, because what it means is you can, of course, set this up on a relative scale such that when somebody hits a threshold, they're then primed for further contact from you. So that's another big thing at ActiveCampaign that's really important, that we don't want to kill that personal interaction, but the idea is that your time is valuable. So how can we help you to understand where and who best to invest your very valuable personal time with?
Cool. And moving over to same subject, same topic, but fostering new business. So a recruiter, and let's also maybe as a sub point to that, could new business be like a completely new lead and prospect, or do we want to talk about new business from an existing client as well?
I think it's both. I mean, I think the latter is often neglected. So I think I think we should bring that up first, to be honest.
Okay.
Oftentimes people don't realize that, I mean, it is obvious that getting business out of an existing client is going to be a lot easier than trying to get a new client. But I don't think most people exhaust the avenues they have available to them in order to get business out of an existing client. But that being said, I mean, of course, we're talking about things like nurture sequences, offering content, trying to be a thought leader, stuff like that. But in addition to that, I think it's also worth kind of thinking about how do you try to gain advocacy from those existing clients? So once you do complete a placement for them, could you possibly ask for a review, a referral? Could you have something automated that goes out? I think, most people don't really think of that as being that important. But when you realize that, what if we could actually automate the process of trying to get reviews or referrals? Even if you could get 2 or 3 more leads a month, that's 2 or 3 more than you already had for absolutely no time investment.
Yeah, no, I love the way you put that. We'll keep track. I think we're tracking well for time, so I won't delve too much into each topic because I think, like I said, this time's going at a good pace. But let's talk about tracking role progress. Obviously, the life cycle of an open role from the time that the role has first been identified to placement and beyond.
Yep. So we know that, of course, the recruitment industry has softwares that are purposed for these kinds of things, such as tracking role progress, obtaining candidate details. But I think the big thing as well is one of the biggest pitfalls that a lot of companies have is they, of course, are stuck across multiple platforms. So how can we best try to consolidate all of those processes so you're looking at one platform? And of course, it streamlines your technology investment cost as well. But by tracking kind of the progress of the role, this is where you could use our CRM. This is a really interesting application of our CRM where it's not necessarily just from a sales lens, but also talking about, well, the candidate placement process. So how can we talk about from when a candidate comes in to, of course, interviews, to placements, to contracts? How do we actually keep track of when our goal is to place a candidate, where are they in that process? How can we help them to move through that? And how can we do so efficiently without losing track of what's going on?
Yeah. I think one thing that I probably should have put down there was our ability to integrate. Specifically, I've been talking to a lot of recruiters that are using JobAdder. We've got an integration with them through Zapier, and I can imagine it would be the same with Bullhorn and other programs. So I think that's also important for anyone listening to understand our ability to stop, particular actions to and from JobAdder to help with that marketing automation is what's also going to help you really make the most of tracking a particular life cycle of an open role.
Great. Just to add to that, actually, Adam, one of the questions we often have with a software like JobAdder is, well, if I've got JobAdder, why do I need something like ActiveCampaign? I think that's a really important point to bring up, wherein JobAdder obviously is purposed for recruitment. It's purposed for collecting recruitment information, for doing things like tracking the role progress. But is it purposed for automation? Is it purposed for communication? I think those are the two things that are our speciality. And if it's not, then of course, whilst you might be getting these fantastic features out of JobAdder, if JobAdder is not leading you to optimize the overall experience for both the client and the candidate, I don't think you present the best version of yourself in terms of a brand.
Yeah, you make a good argument there, mate. My thoughts exactly. Let's move on to talking about the candidate experience now and how we can help optimize the overall experience and process, starting with matching candidates to clients.
Yeah, so we know, of course, that's a key part of a recruiter's day-to-day at the end of the day. And part one of that, of course, is we're trying to find a way to efficiently match them, find the right client for a certain candidate. But also we want to communicate effectively and communicate in a way that that will actually get us some cut through when we present a candidate. So I think part one of that, yes, recruiters often have their own ideas and of course through their own experience, which clients would suit a certain candidate. But again, what if we could streamline and automate this? What if we could make the whole idea of the kind of candidate experience even better? Whereby through ActiveCampaign, as an example, I've worked with clients where they have segmented clients in their platform, or their clients, I should say, in the platform by industry, by roles that they recruit for, so that when they get a new candidate profile, at the click of 1 or 2 buttons, they've automatically and straight away filtered out everybody who could potentially be interested in that client. And just to add to that, there was another client of mine, they took it a step further, and they even segmented their clients by what skills those clients were recruiting for. And as such, what they did, which is extremely clever, and another great capability that we have, within the very same email, they were actually able to vary the content ever so slightly and vary the wording based on those different skills that a particular client was looking for, and as such try to make the communication or presentation of that candidate profile more appealing to those different clients.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of detail we can go into.
Yeah, I guess that's the perfect segue then into subtopic 2, communicating with those candidates, because I know like a tool like Job Adder does great at doing what you've just mentioned in terms of segmenting by industry, skills, all that sort of stuff. But then when it comes to actually communicating with the candidates, like you said earlier, I don't think that those kind of platforms are purposed to communicate in the way that we do. So do you want to elaborate on that as well?
Sure, absolutely. I think from that perspective, like I'll personally speak about my experience. And one of my biggest pain points when I've worked with recruiters in the past has been communication. That I haven't received timely communication. I haven't been kept abreast of what's going on. And at the end of the day, of course, you've got a kind of plethora of roles that you're recruiting for, a plethora of candidates you're trying to deal with. That's never easy. So how can we, and again, this comes with kind of tracking the candidate progress as well, which is kind of another point that we have. How can we do things like trigger communications at different stages, such as when you've got an interview, sending some pre-interview suggestions and times and things like that, and confirming information, pre-screening questions, updates if nothing's happened, follow-ups if you haven't heard from them with respect to a contract, for example, ways that you can really tell the candidate that we're in this for you. And I think the knock-on effect, of course, is that they can speak positively about you. That just enhances your brand equity and hopefully brings more candidates and more clients to your business.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'd like to add to that is our ability to use our site and event tracking feature to the advantage of the recruitment agencies as well, and agents, of course. So if there are, you send your blast email out, and you put your people in your database, and obviously once they fill out a form or they click on a link, we can then use our cookie to start tracking them from that moment on. And as I've been explaining in the lead up to signing up a few clients within this space, one thing that they really did warm to was if they have, say, 10,000 candidates in their database, and in 6 months' time, because timing is everything, so they might not be ready for a job now, but in 6 months' time, they go back to their website to look at some roles that are available, and they might look at one they're interested in, but don't really action it for some reason or one reason or another. What we can do is use our site tracking tool to trigger an automation based on that particular behavior. So can you just talk about your experience helping clients with that feature?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's a very powerful feature where, of course, we can track when people visit a particular page on your website, how many times they visit it. So just as an example, if in the context of a candidate, if we know that they visited 3 or more pages on the site, perhaps they're looking at different roles that you've got advertised on the site, that might indicate a certain level of interest. And this is actually very straightforward to set up. And once you do it, it's really easy to put together an automation that says, in the context of candidates, when they visit 3 pages or a specific page, as an example, if it's a particular role that perhaps you've been finding a bit difficult to recruit for, so perhaps you trigger something as an automated flow, which could send them an email, of course, giving them more information, but also could notify you. I think that's another part that people don't necessarily think about is, yes, we could send automations for outbound communication, but how could we also use it to make our own internal processes more efficient by ensuring we keep abreast of what people are doing and how they're interacting with us?
Yeah, if implemented correctly, it's an extremely powerful tool. Let's then segue over to tracking candidate progress. Obviously, we can use our CRM to do this, and obviously a few other features, but let's talk about the right ways to communicate with clients and candidates based on milestones.
Absolutely. So I think this is where you've got to have, of course, a set process that aligns with what's happening internally. Using our CRM is naturally the way to do that. But then trying to kind of think about, well, where are the milestones in this recruitment process for a candidate or acquisition process for a candidate that I could possibly automate some correspondence? So you've got some examples on screen there where we can talk about an automated pre-screening email, or as you said, interview prep emails, and even things like, as I'd mentioned earlier, how do we possibly send notifications when certain things have been done? So has a candidate responded to one of our emails because we haven't heard from them for a while? Are they still interested? Has a client responded to a certain email, moved their stage in the process, notify the consultant, the recruitment consultant internally so they know what's going on? So I think there's kind of two sides of it, is how do we automate that outbound correspondence potentially for these different milestones and repetitive tasks?
Yeah.
But also how do we use it to keep abreast again of exactly what's going on?
I think how is important, but I think what's just as important is also why. And the reason why this is so important, because in the form of results like ROI and time saved implementing and organizing these foundations, it might take a little bit of time to set up, but even just this screen that we're looking at, you're looking at saving X amount of time, allowing recruiters to focus on potentially, more important things like closing deals, signing proposals, sending the right message to, or, staying in touch with their most valuable clients, and being able to do that because all of this sort of mundane stuff that can be automated is being automated.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely right. I think at the end of the day, that's what you've got to do. You've got to quantify how much manpower and time you're putting into these repetitive tasks. Think about what you could save and how you could reinvest that time. I think it's about opportunity cost. And you hit the nail on the head. You could be using this time, which could be hours every week, to actually generate more business for yourself and ensure that an automated system takes care of it in a way that is not prone to human error. So you can ensure that, of course, this is happening robustly, efficiently, and correctly in the background.
I think that then is the perfect segue to talk about just general challenges that we've helped recruiters overcome. Number one being now is not the right time, in no particular order, but now is not the right time. It could be a COVID thing, it could be a resource thing, or just something in general. We've both added a few things here, but I'll let you touch on this first. What do you say to people that sort of think that now is not the right time for this kind of software?
I love the question you posed at the very start, which is when we first looked at this particular challenge. If now's not the right time, well, then when is the right time? And nobody generally has an answer for that. I think at the end of the day, like, we know that we're dealing with, in recruitment, it's a competitive game. We know that all the competitors are obviously taking steps to try and get ahead and make their processes more efficient. And I don't say that just as kind of an unjustified statement. We work with scores of recruitment businesses who do these things, so we know this firsthand. Yeah. So if all of those guys are getting ahead and doing it, when is going to be the right time for you to do it? Yeah. And will it be too late by the time you decide?
And I guess we're going to talk about the reasons as to why now might not be the right time. So you can see there's budget, but other things that we will talk about as to why. So yeah, we'll touch on that. But let's talk about the budget thing, right? Because it's something that shouldn't be taken lightly, but it's also, as the first point says, which you beautifully stated, it's sort of like, okay, how many resources can you potentially save versus how much you might need to spend with alternate solutions? Can you elaborate on that, please?
Absolutely. I think it comes back to talking about, for the tasks that you could possibly automate, let's just talk about time saving purely. For the tasks you could automate, look at the manpower and staff hours and your own hours that you're investing in it, quantify it, and of course, turn it into dollars. And I'm pretty confident that more often than not, that's going to be higher than the amount that you would invest in a technology such as ours. It's purely because we know that human resources is the biggest expense. So ultimately, I think from a budget standpoint, the way I see it, it really doesn't matter how big the debit column is, but if that credit column is always going to be higher, it's really a no-brainer. And we haven't even touched on the idea that we discussed before around fostering new business. We've purely been talking about time saving.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to click ahead. There we go. And yeah, then not knowing or not sure, the uncertainty about actually using this type of software. And once again, point number one, are you able to robustly and efficiently foster business with your current setup?
I think this is something you summarized really well. And we have 100,000 customers, and we have 100,000 customers for a reason. Like, these businesses have seen that they have certain limitations in, as you said, robustly and efficiently fostering business, looking after their customers and ensuring a high high performance for their business. And I would just say that at the end of the day, if you think that you are in a position where you are efficiently fostering business and you're giving your candidates the best possible experience, then perhaps this isn't for you. But I don't know too many people who have gauged that they have a perfect process for that.
Yeah, and the MailChimp thing as well. I think that this is the combo a lot of recruiters are using, JobAdder and MailChimp. And I don't like, when I say rudimentary solution, when we both say rudimentary solution, we're not trying to bag MailChimp, but I think it does come down to limitations and I guess, yeah, it being a rudimentary solution. So let's talk about why the whole MailChimp argument is kind of potentially not a good enough argument when it comes to it being a challenge. So we're happy with MailChimp.
Look, it's a great technology, but I think the question becomes, and again, to further on your point, we're not using rudimentary with a negative connotation. The idea is saying that, are you looking to take your marketing to the next level? Do you want to send a few bulk emails without sort of any accountability and an objective-based focus that doesn't really translate into business? Or do you want to have a system that responds to behavior and automates such a significant part of your day-to-day operation so you can start dedicating yourself to scaling the business and looking at your business from a more strategic lens?
Yeah.
I think that's the question that you need to ask.
And to put it simply as well, I guess the main differences come in the form of how much manual handling is still required by using a tool like MailChimp in terms of being able to efficiently segment your audiences down to a point that not only makes sense for your business, but to a point where you can absolutely leverage the heck out of it, which then ultimately leads to a lot of time and money saved. And if you've got an ROI mindset, it's like a MailChimp might be X amount per month, but then you sort of say, well, if we can use ActiveCampaign to achieve goals X, Y, and Z, it's worth the investment. So yeah, can you shed some light on what you think about that?
Yeah, I think to me, Adam, one of the pitfalls of email marketing, and at least a pitfall for many people, is that they seem to kind of think that if we have an email marketing platform, and of course we send out a few emails, we're doing the right thing. But again, just going back to the ROI mindset, how much time are you saving? How much money are you generating? Are the emails that you're sending converting into calls or conversations, reviews, any way to enhance your brand equity? Not many people are actually looking at that. People who are using platforms such as MailChimp, I don't think are keeping themselves accountable for the return on investment. And if you look at other channels, if you're investing through social media as an example, which is already a pretty expensive exercise, I'm sure you've got that mindset for that channel. So why shouldn't you have that mindset with email marketing? I would challenge anybody from that perspective. And I don't think a platform like a MailChimp, just as an example of an email service provider that doesn't look after that automation part, actually encourages you with the DNA of being what it is to adopt that sort of mindset.
Yeah, I agree. Last 2 points on the challenges. We can't allocate resources. This is actually a pretty big one that I've faced recently. And I think you've done really well to summarize a way of handling this particular challenge.
Best part of my job, mate, is when I finish with a client and I finish a consultation with a client and they actually come back to me and tell me, this is going to save me X amount of time, or this person can now do something else. And I think that speaks enough for the sort of capabilities that we allow through this whole thing. So I don't think it's really about resources. The idea is we don't want you to allocate resources. Yes, you'll have to allocate resources to set it up. There's no doubt about that. It doesn't matter what sort of solution you adopt, whether it's a manual one or a software, you'll have to invest upfront time. But when you do so, of course, the idea is to ensure that you're streamlining the allocation of those resources so that you don't have to dedicate the time on an ongoing basis.
Absolutely. And finally, the concern about scalability. I think like we were discussing, people were too reliant on multiple platforms. And look, in the last couple of weeks when we've been talking about this, you've been able to elaborate perfectly on this, especially when you refer to us being the single source of truth. So can you touch on that, please?
Absolutely. I think from that standpoint, again, another big pitfall for a lot of companies is they adopt a lot of technologies, and there are some great technologies out there. But at the end of the day, if you have so many technologies that all need to talk to each other and all need to be managed and all, of course, you need to extract value from, As you kind of scale, as you take on more recruitment consultants, as your business starts to grow, how are you, of course, making the most of all of those technologies? And how are you doing it in a way that doesn't actually interfere with your client experience? So I'd kind of argue that this is the one beautiful thing about ActiveCampaign is we can kind of act as the heart of the entire operation. We can consolidate all of your contacts, trigger basic communications, manage what your contacts are looking like. So I think ultimately that's what you want to get to, is a consolidated set of a handful of technologies that are genuinely essential and genuinely actually talk to each other so that your data remains consistent. I think ActiveCampaign kind of sits in the center of all of that.
Perfect. Let's talk about your role as an onboarding specialist, just for the people that are listening, the people that are going to be listening. Why should they be excited about signing up to our platform, and then what happens the moment they do sign up? Obviously, depending what plan they're on, but why is your role so key in the whole process?
With everything we've talked about today, yes, it all sounds exciting. It all sounds interesting, but ultimately when a client finishes with you and you, of course, give them an indication of what they can achieve, they then get to a point of trying to say, well, how do I do it now? Functionally, what do I have to do? What does my strategy look like? I want to get into the nuts and bolts of it. And that's kind of where I come in. So what I essentially do is for new clients that come in that you obviously bring into the business, you refer them to me. My job is then over the next month or so to kind of educate them, guide them, set them up with a strategy and a game plan, and also, of course, teach them the basics of the platform and allow them to understand how they can scale their efforts with ActiveCampaign. So there's two facets of it. One, I think, is giving them a sort of a game plan and, of course, a marketing strategy as well. I think that's one of the best parts about my job, is being able to consult not just on ActiveCampaign, but also on the overall strategy. But then, of course, there's the functional aspect of how can I actually do X or Y or Z? And at the end of the day, not many people just want to read help resources as an example. They don't want to look at a guide. Sometimes having some human interaction to guide them through that just makes the process so much easier. So I think that's one of the best things that we offer at ActiveCampaign, is the amount of support through my team and the wider success team, where we actually offer one-on-one consultations, which can be about marketing strategy, which can be about functionality, which can be about trying to translate a goal into something in ActiveCampaign. I think that's one of the most exciting offerings that we have.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think I'm just going to see if we have any questions. I'll stop the screen share. No questions at the moment, but are there anything else? Are there any other things that you potentially want to highlight or mention before we wrap it up?
I think there's one thing, mate, that we may have glossed over a little bit earlier, which I think is really important, is around when we speak about return on investment with your email marketing. I think it's really important for anybody listening to understand, what's our end game? What really is our goal? Another big kind of misconception about email marketing is that we should be really concerned about open rates and click rates. And yes, those are important. There's no doubt about that. But they're a means to an end. They're not the goal. So your email marketing isn't successful when you have 100% open rate. Your email marketing is successful when that's translating to booking calls, or getting people to respond to you, or filling out inquiry forms, or leaving you reviews or referrals. This is really the end game. So I think, if anything I want people to take away from this is, how do we gear our entire email marketing strategy to be towards those end games that I mentioned?
Beautiful. I think that's a perfect summary. Thank you for the conclusion. Just to wrap it up, we are offering a July promotion, which is obviously still available at the end of June as well. So up until the end of July, if you sign up by then, you can get your second month free. Prior to then, feel free to sign up to our 14-day free trial. I'll help you set that up. If you have any questions, just email me at that email address. That would be fantastic. Amahl, mate, you have been an absolute legend. So thank you for giving up your time today, and look forward to doing this with you again, hopefully soon.
Pleasure, mate. Same here. Before we sign off, I think Craig's got a quick question that I think would be good for you to answer, Adam. He's just asked us, do you have a recruiter-based demo?
Absolutely. Yeah, Craig. I'll contact you after this call, mate, and we'll book in a time to jump on that recruiter demo. Okay, all good. All right, well, I'll give this, I'll stop the screen share unless there's any other questions. We're all good to go. All right, thanks, Amahl. And yeah, thank you everyone else for listening. And I hope we were able to provide you with some value. And until next time,
Thanks.
take care.
Cheers.
All right, see you, mate.